Inside the Ottoman Harem, the horrifying tortures you were never meant to know. Aylan, a young woman of 16, had grown up in this village, her life simple and predictable. Her days were spent helping her mother with household chores, fetching water from the nearby stream, and tending to the small patch of land where her family grew vegetables. She had never imagined a life beyond the hills and fields that surrounded her home. But fate, as it often does, had plans that Aylan could never have imagined. One morning, the village awoke to the arrival of strangers from the distant city of Istanbul. They traveled on horses and carriages, their clothes different from anyone in the village, their faces firm and serious. They carried letters sealed with stamps Aylan did not recognize, and they spoke in voices that commanded attention. They were looking for young women to serve in the imperial palace, to join the harem of the sultan. At first, Aylan's mother was hesitant, worried for her daughter's safety. But the strangers spoke of honor, of serving the sultan and bringing pride to one's family. They promised a life of luxury, fine clothing, and education, a life far removed from the hard work of village labor. Aylan was confused and scared. She had heard stories of the palace from passing travelers, stories filled with splendor and beauty. She had dreamed of seeing Istanbul from afar, imagining the tall minarets and the shining waters of the Bosphorus. But she had also heard whispers of the harem's strict rules and the rumors of suffering hidden behind the palace walls. The thought of leaving her family and village was terrifying, yet the promise of a new life, one filled with learning and refinement, stirred a small spark of curiosity in her heart. After days of preparation, Aylan and a few other selected girls began their journey to Istanbul. The road was long and tiring, stretching over mountains and valleys, through dusty paths and busy marketplaces. Along the way, the girls were taught to walk with grace, to speak with politeness, and to keep their thoughts to themselves. They were warned to never anger their overseers, to smile even when afraid, and to remember that their lives were now bound to the rules of the palace. Every step toward Istanbul felt both thrilling and frightening, as though they were crossing into a world of unknown wonders and hidden dangers. When Aylan first saw the palace from a distance, her breath caught in her throat. The city seemed alive with sounds, colors, and energy she had never known. The palace itself rose like a jewel over the city, its walls shining in the sunlight, domes glistening with gold, and gardens stretching in perfect symmetry. But as they passed through the massive gates, Aylan realized that the palace's beauty was only the surface. The walls were high and imposing, and the gates, though ornate, seemed more like barriers than welcome entrances. Guards stood at every corner, their expressions stern, eyes sharp. It was a world entirely separate from the village she had known, a world where freedom was measured not by choice but by obedience. Inside the harem, the first thing Aylan noticed was the smell. It was a mixture of flowers, oils, incense, and something else she could not place, a faint, cold scent that made her stomach tighten. She was led through long corridors, past rooms filled with other girls, women, and eunuchs, all moving with precision and purpose. The walls were adorned with intricate patterns, and the floors were covered in soft rugs that muffled her footsteps. She saw women dressed in colorful silks, their jewelry glinting as they walked, their faces calm yet distant. It was a beautiful place, but there was an unspoken tension that lingered in the air, as though everyone carried a secret fear behind their smiles. Aylan was assigned to a small room that would be her home for the coming weeks. It was modest compared to the grandeur she had seen in the halls, but comfortable enough. She had a small bed, a chest for her belongings, and a window that looked out onto the palace gardens. From her window, she could see the other women walking in the courtyards, some laughing softly, others moving with a quiet, serious grace. At first, Aylan felt a strange mix of awe and isolation. She was surrounded by people, yet entirely alone in her new world. Over the following days, Aylan began to learn the rules of the harem. Every movement, every word, every glance was observed. The women were expected to follow strict routines, waking at specific hours, attending lessons in etiquette, music, and reading, and maintaining the highest standards of personal appearance. Any sign of disrespect, disobedience, or jealousy could lead to reprimand. Aylan realized that even the smallest mistake could have consequences, though the exact nature of those consequences was often left unspoken, whispered about only in secret. She met other girls who had been in the harem longer than she had. Some were kind, offering guidance and friendship, while others seemed cold and distant, their eyes calculating and cautious. Island quickly learned that alliances were important, that friendship could provide comfort and protection, but that trust was a fragile thing. Rumors of punishment, rivalries, and hidden rules circulated quietly among the girls. Some spoke of girls who had disappeared from their rooms, only to return pale and silent, never speaking of what had happened. Others told stories of women who were sent to distant parts of the palace for months as a form of correction. Aileen listened carefully, absorbing the stories without showing fear, though inside her heart, anxiety grew. Despite the tension, there were moments of wonder. Aileen was taught to read and write, to play musical instruments, and to dance gracefully. She was allowed to study poetry and history, learning about the great rulers and events of the empire. During these lessons, she felt a sense of possibility, a sense that knowledge and skill could give her some control over her life in a place where freedom was limited. Yet even in these moments of learning, she noticed the careful watchfulness of her instructors, the subtle reminders that she was being shaped not just for education, but for service and obedience. As the weeks passed, Aileen began to understand the hierarchy within the harem. There were women of high rank, favorites of the sultan, who held power over others and could offer protection or punishment. Eunuchs patrolled the corridors, maintaining order and carrying messages between the women and the sultan's officials. Every action, from the way a girl walked to the way she spoke, was carefully scrutinized. Aileen realized that her survival depended on her ability to observe, to learn the unspoken rules, and to remain cautious in her interactions. One evening, Aileen was allowed to walk in the palace gardens. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the fountains, flowers, and marble pathways. She felt a rare moment of peace as she listened to the soft sound of water and watched the light play on the leaves. Yet even in this beauty, she could not forget the whispers she had heard, the stories of those who had suffered for failing to follow the rules. The palace, she realized, was a world of contrasts, luxury and fear, beauty and danger, freedom and strict control. Each moment of joy was tempered by the awareness that her life here was fragile, dependent on the favor of those in power. Aileen also began to notice the subtle ways the women navigated the complex social web of the harem. Some used charm and intelligence to gain influence, others relied on secrecy and quiet observation. She learned that friendships could be both protective and dangerous, that jealousy and ambition were constant forces. The stories she heard of punishments, though never openly discussed, loomed in her mind. Women who displeased the sultan or offended the wrong person might be confined, humiliated, or sent away. The harem's system of control was precise and unyielding, designed to ensure that every woman knew her place. As Aileen settled into her life, she began to form a small circle of allies, girls who shared her curiosity, her caution, and her desire to understand the rules of this strange, gilded world. Together, they exchanged stories, shared small comforts, and warned each other of the dangers that lurked behind every smile. They learned to communicate in subtle ways, using gestures and glances to convey messages without attracting attention. These small acts of friendship became essential for survival, a reminder that even in a world designed to isolate and control, human connection could endure. Despite the hardships, Aileen remained determined to make the most of her new life. She studied diligently, practiced her skills, and observed everything around her with a careful eye. She began to see patterns in the behavior of the women, understanding how alliances were formed, how power was exercised, and how fear was used to maintain order. Each day brought lessons, both in education and in survival, shaping her into someone capable of navigating the delicate balance of the harem. In her quiet moments, Aileen thought of her village, of the simple life she had left behind. She missed the open sky, the laughter of children, and the gentle rhythm of the seasons. But she also recognized that she was part of something much larger now, a world of influence, power, and history. The palace was not just a home for the sultan and his court. It was a world unto itself, with rules, secrets, and dangers that had been hidden from outsiders for centuries. Aileen realized that her journey had only just begun, that the lessons she learned in these early weeks would shape everything that followed. As Part 1 concludes, Aileen stands at the threshold of discovery. The gates of the harem, once a symbol of wonder, have revealed their dual nature, a place of beauty and privilege, yet also a world of strict rules, hidden fears, and whispered stories of suffering. She understands that to survive, she must learn, adapt, and observe, for the true life within the palace is far more complex than the myths outside could ever convey. The journey ahead promises challenges, dangers, and revelations that will test her courage, intelligence, and resilience in ways she has never imagined. After weeks of settling into the palace, Island began to feel the rhythm of life in the harem. The days were long and filled with lessons, exercises, and constant observation. Each morning the girls would rise before the sun, the soft light filtering through the delicate curtains of their rooms. They were expected to dress carefully, their clothing neatly arranged, their hair perfectly styled. Even small imperfections could attract attention, and attention was something Island had learned to approach with caution. Education was a central part of life in the harem. Island spent hours learning to read and write, memorizing poetry, and studying the history of the empire. Music and dance lessons followed, teaching her how to move gracefully and perform with elegance. At first, the lessons felt overwhelming, and Island struggled to keep pace with the more experienced girls. Yet, she soon discovered that perseverance and attention to detail could earn her quiet respect from her instructors. Every skill she mastered was a tool, a small way to gain control in a place designed to limit freedom. The social dynamics of the harem were more complex than Island had imagined. Some girls formed bonds quickly, sharing their stories, fears, and advice. Others were distant, their eyes always watchful, their words carefully measured. Island learned to read expressions, to notice subtle gestures that indicated mood or intention. She realized that alliances were a form of protection, a way to navigate the uncertainties of palace life. Whispered conversations became lessons in diplomacy, teaching her when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to observe quietly from the shadows. Among the girls, jealousy and competition were constant forces. Island saw how small favors from the Sultan or his officials could change relationships overnight. A compliment, a glance, or the offer of a privileged task could spark admiration in one moment and resentment in the next. The girls were aware that power was not always fair or predictable, and each of them had to find a way to survive within this delicate balance. Island learned that kindness could be both a shield and a vulnerability, and that careful observation was often more valuable than words. Daily routines were strictly enforced. Morning lessons were followed by practice sessions in singing, dancing, and embroidery. Meals were taken quietly, with attention to proper manners and etiquette. The afternoons brought more structured activities, calligraphy, history lessons, or time spent in the gardens. Even leisure was controlled, with opportunities for rest or play limited by schedules and supervision. Every moment was a lesson in discipline and observation. Island began to see that life in the harem was designed to shape not only behavior but also character, molding the women into figures of grace, intelligence, and obedience. Despite the strict routines, Island began to find moments of friendship and support. She met Layla, a girl a year older than herself who had been in the harem for several years. Layla was quiet and thoughtful, with a gentle smile that could calm fears. She shared small tips for surviving the social intricacies of the harem: how to avoid drawing unwanted attention, how to navigate the moods of the senior women, and how to handle the subtle tests of obedience that occurred daily. Through Layla, Island discovered the importance of trust, learning that a true friend could offer guidance, comfort, and protection in equal measure. As Island became more accustomed to the routines, she also began to notice the rules that were not written down. Certain rooms were off-limits, and some corners of the palace were guarded more closely than others. Whispers circulated about the consequences of disobedience, though details were rarely spoken aloud. Some girls had been reprimanded for failing to follow instructions, and while the punishments varied, the lesson was always clear: compliance was essential. Island observed how senior women enforced these rules, sometimes with quiet warnings, other times with stern authority, always reinforcing the hierarchy within the harem. One of the most challenging aspects of life in the harem was learning to manage emotions. Island discovered that jealousy, pride, or anger could be dangerous if not carefully controlled. Observing the interactions between the girls, she saw how quickly relationships could shift. A kind gesture might be misinterpreted, a compliment might spark envy, and a careless word could lead to conflict. The harem was a place where emotions were not just personal, they were social tools and potential risks. Aileen learned to observe carefully, to speak cautiously, and to keep her feelings measured, recognizing that survival depended on self-awareness as much as skill or beauty. During quiet moments, Aileen explored the gardens and courtyards of the palace. These spaces were designed with careful attention to detail. Flowing fountains, vibrant flowers, and winding pathways created an atmosphere of serenity and beauty. Walking among the flowers, she would often pause to watch the birds, feeling a rare sense of freedom in a world otherwise controlled. It was in these moments that she reflected on her life before the palace, the open fields of her village, the laughter of her family, and the simple joys of a life unbound by strict rules. The contrast between her past and present made her aware of both the opportunities and the challenges that awaited her. Aileen also began to understand the subtle ways in which influence worked in the harem. Some girls had the favor of powerful women or were skilled in appealing to the sultan's interests. Others relied on their intelligence and discretion to navigate delicate situations. Aileen realized that survival required a combination of skill, observation, and careful alliances. She learned to notice small gestures of attention or approval and to use them wisely. Even in a world filled with rules and hierarchy, subtlety and cleverness could create opportunities for growth and protection. As the weeks turned into months, Aileen began to witness the first examples of subtle punishments. Girls who failed to follow instructions were sometimes sent to quiet rooms for reflection or asked to perform additional tasks. These moments were not always severe, but they served as reminders that the rules were serious and that observation was constant. Aileen noticed the changes in the girls who were reprimanded. Their steps became more careful, their eyes more cautious, and their words measured. The harem system of discipline was precise and often invisible, teaching lessons through controlled correction rather than open confrontation. Aileen's curiosity about the palace and its hidden rules continued to grow. She asked questions quietly, observing the responses of the senior women and learning what could be asked and what could not. Layla advised her to listen more than she spoke and to watch carefully how others navigated the hierarchy. This advice proved invaluable, as Aileen discovered that knowledge, observation, and discretion were just as important as skill or beauty. Understanding the dynamics of the harem allowed her to anticipate challenges and avoid unnecessary conflict, giving her a sense of control in an otherwise rigid environment. One afternoon, Aileen had her first formal audience with a senior member of the harem. The woman was dressed in elaborate robes, her hair adorned with jewels, her demeanor commanding yet calm. She spoke with authority, assessing Aileen's behavior, manners, and attention to detail. Aileen felt both nervous and proud, aware that this interaction could influence her standing in the harem. She had prepared carefully, following the advice she had received from Layla and observing the expectations around her. The meeting went smoothly, with the senior woman offering subtle praise and gentle guidance. Aileen left the audience feeling both relieved and motivated, understanding that every interaction mattered in this world of observation and influence. Despite the challenges, there were moments of joy and learning that reminded Aileen of the value of her experiences. Music lessons allowed her to create beauty, dance practice gave her a sense of control and expression, and reading opened doors to history and poetry she had never known. These activities were more than just lessons. They were ways to develop resilience, patience, and creativity. Aileen realized that the harem, though strict and demanding, offered opportunities for personal growth, if one learned to navigate its complexities wisely. Evenings were often spent in quiet reflection. Aileen would sit by her window, looking out at the palace gardens as the sun dipped below the horizon. She thought about her family, her village, and the journey that had brought her here. She reflected on the friendships she was forming, the lessons she had learned, and the challenges that awaited. In these moments, she found strength and determination, understanding that her survival and growth depended on both her mind and her heart. Each day in the harem was a lesson, not just in etiquette and skill, but in patience, awareness, and resilience. Aileen began to notice patterns in the behavior of the girls and the senior women. She observed how attention, favor, and disfavor could shift unexpectedly, depending on subtle cues and small actions. She learned to anticipate moods, to act with care, and to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. This understanding allowed her to move more confidently within the harem, balancing obedience with individuality, skill with discretion. She realized that intelligence and observation were powerful tools, perhaps even more important than beauty or charm in navigating this world. As Part 2 draws to a close, Aileen has begun to adapt to life in the harem. She has learned the importance of observation, patience, and careful alliances. She has experienced both the beauty and the strictness of her environment, understanding that survival requires attention, skill, and wisdom. Though the harem remains a world of mystery, rules, and hierarchy, Aileen has begun to find her place, building confidence in her ability to navigate the complexities around her. The days ahead promise further lessons, new challenges, and discoveries that will test her courage, intelligence, and resilience, shaping her journey in ways she has only begun to imagine. Life in the harem continued to reveal itself to Aileen as a world of contrasts. On the surface, there was beauty and refinement, gleaming floors, fragrant gardens, colorful silks, and the soft music that floated through the halls. Yet beneath that beauty was a hidden tension, a network of rules and expectations that affected every action, word, and thought. Aileen had begun to understand that survival in the harem was not just about following instructions or mastering skills. It was also about observing, learning, and adapting to the subtle ways that power and authority operated. Over the weeks, Aileen began to notice more clearly the consequences for mistakes or disobedience. They were rarely violent, yet the effects were deeply felt. A girl might be asked to remain in her room for an entire day, allowed only to eat small meals at scheduled times. Another might be tasked with extra chores while others rested, their fatigue a constant reminder of the importance of careful behavior. Aileen observed that these forms of discipline were intended not just to correct behavior, but to instill a sense of caution and respect for the hierarchy. The women quickly learned that even a minor misstep could lead to hours of discomfort or isolation. Aileen also saw that the psychological aspect of these punishments was just as powerful as the physical. Some girls were made to sit in silence, while others spoke freely around them. Some were reminded constantly of their mistakes, their errors discussed in whispers for all to hear. These subtle measures created a sense of unease, teaching the girls that their every action mattered and that the eyes of the harem were always upon them. Aileen learned to watch and listen carefully, understanding that knowledge of these hidden rules was essential for her own survival. The senior women of the harem were particularly skilled in guiding, instructing, and sometimes testing the girls. They held a delicate balance of authority and mentorship, showing kindness at times while also enforcing discipline when necessary. Aileen observed how they could influence the moods and relationships of the younger girls, offering approval to some while withholding attention from others. It was clear that their power was both respected and feared, and that their judgment could affect the lives of the girls in subtle but meaningful ways. Aileen realized that understanding the motivations and personalities of these senior figures was crucial for navigating the complex social structure of the palace. Aileen's own mistakes were small at first, a mispronounced word, a misplaced gesture, or an error in her lessons. Each time she experienced the quiet but firm consequences of the harem's discipline. Sitting alone in her room, she would reflect on what had happened, asking herself how she could improve, how she could avoid repeating the same mistake. Over time, these experiences taught her patience, humility, and careful attention to detail. She learned that knowledge alone was not enough. Success required observation, reflection, and the ability to adapt. Despite these challenges, there were moments of warmth and solidarity. Aileen's friendship with Layla deepened, and together they found ways to support one another. They shared stories, offered encouragement, and helped each other with lessons and tasks. These bonds became a source of comfort in a world where every action was observed and every word could carry consequences. Aileen realized that while the harem demanded strict obedience, human connection remained an essential form of strength, providing both emotional support and practical guidance. The hierarchy of the harem also became clearer to Aileen. There were women who had the favor of the sultan, whose influence allowed them to protect or mentor others. There were those who held authority over smaller groups of girls, guiding them in daily routines and ensuring compliance with the rules. And there were those like Island, newer and less experienced, who were learning the ropes, observing the patterns, and understanding the boundaries of their own influence. Every day brought lessons in patience, strategy, and social awareness, shaping Island into a girl who could navigate the complex web of relationships within the palace. One day, Island witnessed a more serious instance of discipline. A girl named Yasmin had made a repeated mistake in her lessons, and the senior woman in charge decided that a stronger reminder was necessary. Yasmin was asked to spend the entire day in quiet reflection, her usual comforts withheld. Island watched from a distance as Yasmin moved silently through the halls, her face pale and her posture careful. It was a sobering lesson for Island, demonstrating that even small errors could lead to discomfort and a sense of vulnerability. She understood that the harem's rules were enforced consistently, and that awareness, humility, and careful conduct were essential for her own well-being. Island also began to notice the subtle ways in which influence and favor worked within the harem. Some girls were able to gain the attention of senior women or officials through skill, charm, or intelligence. Others learned to navigate social interactions with tact, avoiding conflicts and building alliances quietly. Island realized that survival depended on understanding both the explicit rules and the unspoken codes of behavior. She began to observe carefully, noting the gestures, expressions, and reactions of those around her. This awareness allowed her to anticipate challenges and opportunities, giving her a sense of control in an otherwise highly structured environment. As Island gained experience, she also began to understand the importance of discretion. Some conversations had to be whispered, and some topics were to be avoided entirely. She learned to listen more than she spoke, to ask questions carefully, and to gauge the mood of those around her. This skill became invaluable, as it allowed her to gather information and make informed decisions without attracting unwanted attention. Island realized that intelligence, observation, and discretion were powerful tools, often more important than skill or beauty in ensuring safety and success within the harem. The gardens and courtyards continued to offer Island a sense of calm and perspective. She spent quiet moments walking along the paths, observing the flowing fountains and the vibrant flowers. These walks were not just for leisure, they were times for reflection and mental preparation. Island considered her place in the harem, the lessons she had learned, and the challenges that lay ahead. She thought of her family and village, holding on to memories of home as a source of strength and motivation. These moments of solitude allowed her to gather her thoughts, renew her determination, and plan her steps carefully. Island also became more aware of the emotional struggles of the other girls. She noticed how some seemed anxious, cautious, or withdrawn, while others projected confidence or charm as a form of protection. Each girl navigated the harem in her own way, balancing obedience with self-preservation. Island observed how friendships could provide support, but also how jealousy and ambition could create tension. She learned that understanding the emotions and motivations of those around her was as important as mastering skills or following rules. One particularly important lesson came when Island witnessed an argument between two girls. It began over a minor misunderstanding, but the tension escalated as each girl tried to assert herself. The senior women intervened quietly but firmly, reminding the girls of the importance of harmony and respect. Island saw how quickly relationships could shift and how small actions could have larger consequences. She understood that conflict could be dangerous, not only because of immediate punishment, but also because it could affect her reputation and alliances. From that day forward, Island resolved to navigate disagreements with tact and discretion, seeking solutions that preserved harmony and minimized risk. As Part 3 continued, Island's understanding of the harem deepened. She realized that while the environment could be strict and intimidating, it was also a place of learning, strategy, and growth. The lessons she absorbed went beyond academics or etiquette. They were lessons in human behavior, observation, and adaptation. Each day provided new challenges and opportunities, shaping her into someone capable of navigating the complex social and hierarchical structures around her. Island began to see the harem not only as a place of restriction, but also as a world of opportunity. Those who were careful, observant, and intelligent could find ways to gain favor, influence, and security. She understood that her actions, decisions, and alliances mattered greatly, and that patience, thoughtfulness, and discretion were essential qualities for success. By observing patterns, anticipating consequences, and cultivating friendships, Island could navigate the challenges she faced with confidence and resilience. Through all of this, Island's bond with Layla and a few other trusted friends remained her greatest source of strength. They shared knowledge, offered support, and provided comfort in moments of uncertainty. These friendships allowed Island to endure the difficulties of the harem while also gaining valuable insight into its inner workings. Together, they learned to read the moods of senior women, anticipate the consequences of actions, and support one another in the face of challenges. These small acts of solidarity became a foundation upon which Island could build her confidence and skill. As Part 3 draws to a close, Island stands on the edge of new understanding. She has witnessed the subtle forms of discipline, observed the intricate social dynamics, and begun to develop strategies for survival and growth. The harem is a world of contrasts: beauty and strictness, friendship and rivalry, opportunity and caution. Island's journey has taught her the importance of observation, patience, and discretion, as well as the power of alliances and intelligence. She is no longer simply a newcomer learning the rules. She is becoming a young woman capable of navigating the complexities of her world, prepared to face the challenges that the days ahead will inevitably bring. As months passed, Island began to see more clearly that the harem was not only a place of beauty, learning, and refinement, it was also a world of secrets, whispers, and hidden challenges. The lessons she had learned in patience, observation, and discretion were becoming more valuable with each passing day. She realized that much of life in the palace existed beneath the surface, unseen by outsiders, and that understanding these hidden truths was essential for survival. Island started noticing the small things that others seemed to ignore. The way certain women lingered in the hallways, whispering softly and glancing around nervously. The subtle gestures that indicated approval or disapproval from the senior women. The way some girls were suddenly called to perform tasks or attend lessons at unexpected times. All of these actions had meaning, signaling shifts in power, attention, or favor. Island understood that the harem operated like a carefully choreographed dance, where every movement had a purpose, and even minor missteps could have consequences. Friendships and alliances became even more important as she observed these subtle patterns. Layla, her closest friend, continued to guide her, pointing out nuances in behavior and relationships that Island might otherwise have missed. Together, they began to notice signs of tension, competition, and hidden rivalries among the girls. Some sought favor with senior women through charm or skill, while others relied on careful observation and discretion. Island learned that it was not enough to follow the rules. She had to understand the social currents, anticipate reactions, and choose her words and actions carefully. The harem's rules were strict, but the consequences for disobedience or mistakes could be more severe than Island had previously realized. One day, she witnessed a girl named Alif being quietly reprimanded for breaking a rule regarding proper conduct in a lesson. Alif was not punished physically, but she was sent to a quiet room for reflection, her interactions with others restricted for several days. During that time, she was isolated from friends and forbidden from participating in group activities. Island watched carefully, noting how the isolation affected Alif's demeanor. She became quieter, her steps careful, her expressions subdued. This reinforced what Island had already begun to understand. Discipline in the harem was as much about teaching caution and obedience as it was about correcting behavior. Beyond the formal rules, Island began to hear whispers about the hidden aspects of the harem that few dared to speak of openly. Stories circulated of girls who had been confined or disciplined in private ways, the details unspoken but understood. These stories were shared in hushed tones, often between trusted friends like Layla and herself. They spoke not to frighten, but to prepare each other, to teach vigilance and awareness. Island realized that these accounts were a part of learning how to survive in the palace. They were lessons in observation, discretion, and understanding the unspoken rules that governed life behind the gilded walls. One afternoon, while walking quietly through a secluded corridor, Island stumbled upon a group of girls sharing their experiences in whispers. They spoke of months of extra duties, the careful management of attention from senior women, and the delicate balance required to maintain favor without attracting disapproval. Some described periods of quiet reflection in rooms away from the main areas, where they were left to think about their actions and learn patience. Island listened attentively, recognizing that every shared experience was a lesson in both survival and resilience. The gardens of the palace continued to provide Island with moments of peace, but even here, she learned to be cautious. Certain paths were watched, and even in the quiet of nature, she remained aware that observation was constant. She noticed how senior women would sometimes appear without warning, how gestures or expressions could change quickly, and how knowledge of these small details could prevent problems. Island began to understand that vigilance was as much a part of life as learning music, dance, or reading. Every detail, no matter how small, could influence her standing and safety in the harem. As her understanding deepened, Island began to observe patterns in the ways girls gained or lost favor. Those who were attentive, clever, and discreet often found protection and guidance from senior women. Others, less careful or less aware, risked isolation or reprimand. Island learned that the harem's environment rewarded intelligence, awareness, and emotional control. She began to apply these lessons consciously, analyzing interactions and carefully choosing how to speak and act. Each day became a new opportunity to learn, to grow, and to understand the complex web of relationships around her. Island's curiosity also led her to notice the network of communication among the girls. Small signals, a glance, a hand gesture, a subtle change in expression, carried messages that could guide actions or warn of danger. These unspoken cues allowed girls to share information without attracting attention, forming a hidden language of survival. Island began practicing this language, learning to read the subtleties of expressions, postures, and whispers. She realized that understanding the hidden signals within the harem was just as important as following the formal rules. One day, a senior woman approached Island and asked her to assist in a task involving organization and preparation for a visit by palace officials. This was a rare opportunity for Island, and she accepted with careful attention and respect. As she worked, she observed how the senior woman managed the other girls, noting the strategies used to maintain order and encourage compliance. Island realized that these lessons in management and influence could be applied not only to her own survival, but also to understanding the broader dynamics of the harem. She began to see that every task, no matter how small, carried lessons in strategy, observation, and human behavior. Through these experiences, Island also learned the importance of patience and timing. Actions taken too quickly, words spoken carelessly, or gestures misinterpreted could lead to misunderstandings or disfavor. She observed how girls who mastered the art of waiting, of choosing the right moment to act or speak, often found themselves more secure and respected. Island practiced this carefully, learning to pause, assess situations, and respond with thoughtfulness. This skill became a vital tool, helping her navigate a world where every choice could have consequences. Island's understanding of the harem's hidden rules grew as she noticed how girls dealt with challenges and setbacks. Some responded with caution and humility, others with quiet determination and resilience. She realized that the ability to adapt, to maintain composure under pressure, and to learn from mistakes was a form of strength. Island began to view the harem not only as a place of restriction, but also as a place where intelligence, strategy, and emotional control could lead to growth and security. She learned to value her own abilities and to trust in her capacity to navigate the complexities around her. As she became more confident, Island also began to help others, offering guidance to girls who were new or struggling. She shared the lessons she had learned, providing advice on observation, patience, and understanding social cues. This allowed her to build relationships and alliances, reinforcing the importance of friendship and mutual support. Island discovered that helping others was not only an act of kindness, but also a strategic way to strengthen her position and create a network of trust within the harem. The gardens, corridors, and private rooms of the harem continued to serve as both learning spaces and places of reflection. Island spent hours observing the interactions of others, practicing her own skills, and thinking about the lessons she had learned. She noticed patterns, anticipated reactions, and considered the consequences of her actions. Each day provided a new set of challenges, opportunities, and insights. The harem, once mysterious and intimidating, was gradually becoming a place where Aileen could understand the balance of power, influence, and survival. Aileen also began to realize the subtle ways in which courage and resilience could manifest. Facing challenges, navigating social complexities, and learning to remain composed under scrutiny required strength and intelligence. She admired the girls who had mastered these skills and sought to emulate their calm, thoughtful approach. Through careful observation and practice, Aileen developed her own sense of confidence, recognizing that even in a world of strict rules and hidden pressures, personal strength and strategy could make a difference. As Part 4 draws to a close, Aileen's understanding of the harem has grown deeper. She has learned to read people, anticipate consequences, and navigate the hidden rules that govern daily life. She has experienced the subtle forms of discipline, witnessed the complexities of alliances, and observed the strategies used by both senior women and her peers. Aileen's journey has taught her patience, observation, emotional control, and the value of friendship and support. The harem, with its beauty, rules, and hidden challenges, has become a place of learning and growth for Aileen. She understands that survival and success depend on intelligence, strategy, and resilience. As she prepares for the days ahead, Aileen is no longer simply a newcomer learning the rules. She is a young woman developing the skills, awareness, and courage necessary to navigate a world of complexity, hierarchy, and hidden realities. The path ahead promises new challenges and revelations, but Aileen is ready to face them with careful thought, strength, and determination. Over the years, Aileen had grown from a frightened, uncertain girl into a young woman of remarkable awareness, patience, and resilience. She had learned the intricate rhythms of the harem, the subtle movements of power and influence, and the delicate art of observing without drawing attention. Yet, despite her growing confidence, Aileen remained aware that life in the palace was never entirely predictable. Every day brought new challenges, requiring careful thought, quick adjustment, and sometimes quiet courage. By now, Aileen had become familiar with many parts of the palace that had once seemed intimidating or mysterious. She knew which corridors led to quiet gardens, which rooms were safe for private reflection, and which senior women could be approached with questions or requests. She had developed a network of trusted friends, including Layla, who had become more like a sister than just a friend. Together, they shared advice, offered support, and guided one another through the complex dynamics of the harem. Aileen realized that these relationships were among the most valuable tools for survival, providing both companionship and insight. With experience came a deeper understanding of the human nature that shaped life in the harem. Aileen observed the motivations, ambitions, and fears of the women around her. Some sought favor through charm or intelligence, while others relied on careful observation and patience. Rivalries were quiet but ever-present. Alliances shifted with circumstance, and attention from the sultan or senior women could alter a girl's standing instantly. Aileen had learned to navigate these dynamics with thoughtfulness, combining observation, discretion, and a growing confidence in her own judgment. One of the most important lessons Aileen had learned was the power of subtle influence. Small acts of kindness, quiet gestures of support, or careful advice could create trust and loyalty, while thoughtless words or careless actions could invite disfavor. Aileen had begun to notice that leadership and influence in the harem were not always obvious. Often, they were quiet, measured, and strategic. By understanding this, she was able to act thoughtfully, building relationships that provided guidance, protection, and insight. During this time, Aileen also began to reflect on her own personal growth. The girl who had arrived at the palace timid and uncertain had become capable of navigating a complex social world with skill and composure. She had learned to manage her emotions, to anticipate challenges, and to act with discretion and intelligence. These abilities were invaluable, not only for survival, but for creating a sense of agency within a world that often seemed to limit freedom. Aileen felt a quiet pride in her resilience, recognizing that each lesson she had learned had strengthened her mind and character. Even as she grew more confident, Aileen remained aware of the vulnerabilities that existed within the harem. The environment could be unpredictable, and fortunes could shift with little warning. She had witnessed moments when girls lost favor or faced reprimand, and she understood that vigilance, discretion, and careful behavior were always necessary. Eileen had also learned the importance of empathy, observing how small acts of support or encouragement could help others endure the pressures of life in the palace. These lessons reinforced her belief that strength and kindness could coexist, even in a world shaped by hierarchy and control. A turning point came when Eileen was given a special responsibility by a senior woman. She was asked to help organize an event for visiting officials, a task that required careful planning, coordination, and attention to detail. Eileen approached the task with diligence, observing carefully, delegating responsibilities thoughtfully, and ensuring that every detail was executed smoothly. Her efforts were recognized, and the success of the event brought her both respect and a sense of accomplishment. This experience reinforced her understanding that intelligence, organization, and strategic thinking could provide opportunities for influence and growth, even within the strict confines of the harem. As her reputation grew, Eileen also began to notice the subtle ways in which knowledge could be empowering. She had become skilled at observing patterns, understanding unspoken rules, and anticipating the needs and reactions of those around her. This awareness allowed her to act confidently and thoughtfully, building trust with both peers and senior women. Eileen realized that knowledge, combined with patience and discretion, was a powerful tool, allowing her to navigate challenges, support others, and maintain a sense of control in a world that often demanded obedience. Despite the strict rules and constant observation, Eileen found moments of joy and personal fulfillment. Music, poetry, and dance remained sources of comfort and self-expression. Quiet walks in the gardens, reflection at her window, and shared conversations with friends offered opportunities to rest, recharge, and contemplate her experiences. These moments reminded her of the importance of balance. Even in a demanding environment, small pleasures and personal reflection could provide strength and clarity. Eileen had learned to value these moments, understanding that resilience required both awareness and self-care. Eileen also began to see the impact of her guidance and support on others. Younger girls looked to her for advice, for reassurance, and for examples of thoughtful behavior. She shared the lessons she had learned about observation, discretion, and navigating social dynamics, helping them understand how to succeed within the harem. These moments of mentorship brought her a sense of purpose and reinforced the importance of solidarity, trust, and kindness. Eileen realized that her growth was not just personal. It had the potential to influence and support others, creating a quiet ripple effect within the palace. Through her experiences, Eileen developed a deep understanding of resilience and courage. Life in the harem required not only skill and knowledge, but also the ability to endure challenges, to remain composed under pressure, and to adapt to changing circumstances. Eileen had faced uncertainty, witnessed subtle conflicts, and learned to navigate hidden rules. Each experience had strengthened her character, teaching her patience, intelligence, and emotional control. She understood that true resilience was not merely surviving difficulties, but using them as opportunities for growth and learning. Eileen's reflections also led her to consider the legacy of the harem itself. She thought about the generations of women who had lived, learned, and endured within these walls. Each had faced challenges, navigated hierarchies, and developed skills for survival. Eileen recognized that the harem was a place of both restriction and opportunity, where intelligence, observation, and resilience could create paths for influence and growth. She felt a connection to those who had come before her, drawing strength from their experiences and understanding the importance of carrying forward lessons learned. As her time in the harem progressed, Eileen began to contemplate her future beyond the palace walls. She had grown in confidence, knowledge, and skill, and she knew that the lessons she had learned would serve her well in any path she chose. Eileen understood that life was a journey, shaped by both circumstance and personal choice. While the harem had provided challenges and strict rules, it had also offered opportunities for growth, self-discovery, and understanding human behavior. She resolved to carry these lessons with her, using them to navigate the wider world with intelligence, discretion, and courage. Eileen also reflected on the friendships and alliances she had built. The bonds she shared with Layla and other trusted companions had provided support, comfort, and guidance. These relationships were a reminder of the importance of human connection, empathy, and collaboration. Island understood that even in a world structured by hierarchy and control, kindness and trust could create strength and resilience. She valued these connections deeply, knowing that they had shaped her experiences and contributed to her growth. One of the final lessons Island learned was the value of observation and foresight. By carefully watching the interactions of others, anticipating potential challenges, and responding thoughtfully, she had developed the ability to navigate complex social dynamics with skill and confidence. This awareness allowed her to act decisively when necessary, while also maintaining discretion and patience. Island realized that success in the harem, and in life more broadly, required a balance of intelligence, strategy, and emotional control. As Part 5 draws to its climax, Island stood with a sense of quiet accomplishment. She had grown from a young girl unsure of her place into a young woman capable of navigating a world of complexity, hierarchy, and hidden rules. She had learned to observe, adapt, and respond with thoughtfulness, developing skills that would serve her well for the rest of her life. Island's journey had taught her about patience, resilience, friendship, and the power of knowledge. She had faced challenges, witnessed the struggles of others, and discovered the strength within herself to endure and thrive. In her final reflections, Island recognized that the harem was a place of contrasts: beauty and strictness, opportunity and challenge, friendship and rivalry. It had been a world of both learning and limitation, and it had shaped her in ways that extended far beyond the palace walls. She understood that the lessons she had gained were not only about etiquette or skill, but also about human nature, strategy, and the capacity to adapt. These lessons would guide her through future experiences, providing wisdom, resilience, and confidence. Island also considered the broader legacy of the harem. She realized that the stories of those who lived within its walls were rarely told in full, hidden behind myths and external perceptions. By observing carefully, learning from her experiences, and reflecting on the challenges she had faced, Island had gained insight into the lives of the women who had come before her. She understood that their strength, intelligence, and resilience were qualities that could inspire others, highlighting the courage and skill required to navigate a world often misunderstood or misrepresented. In the final days of her time in the palace, Island felt a sense of readiness and empowerment. She had learned to balance caution with initiative, observation with action, and patience with determination. She had built friendships, developed skills, and gained knowledge that would serve her for a lifetime. The challenges of the harem had shaped her into a young woman of remarkable awareness, strength, and resilience. Island understood that her journey was not over, but she now possessed the tools, insight, and confidence to face whatever lay ahead. As she walked through the gardens one last time, Island reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought of her village, her family, and the young girl who had arrived at the palace uncertain and frightened. She felt gratitude for the lessons she had learned, for the friends who had guided and supported her, and for the experiences that had shaped her character. Island understood that while the harem had been a place of strict rules and hidden challenges, it had also been a school for resilience, intelligence, and courage. Island's story concluded with a sense of hope and empowerment. She had learned to navigate a complex and demanding environment, to understand the subtleties of human behavior, and to cultivate strength, patience, and discretion. The experiences she had gained within the palace would guide her through life, providing wisdom, confidence, and resilience. Her journey in the harem was a testament to the power of observation, courage, and personal growth, and it offered a glimpse into the hidden realities of a world often shrouded in myth. Island left the palace not only with the skills to survive, but with a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her. She had discovered the importance of friendship, observation, patience, and resilience. She had learned that knowledge and discretion were forms of power, that small acts of kindness could create trust and loyalty, and that courage often manifested in quiet, thoughtful ways. As she stepped beyond the gates of the harem, Island carried with her the lessons of a world both beautiful and challenging, ready to face the future with confidence, intelligence, and heart.